Hello and welcome to another episode of All in a Day of Sports. I'm still your host, Salman. Just a few reminders before we get into this episode. We are still on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Those links are in the description. But now we are also on Instagram at All in a Day of Sports, just like the handle is on YouTube. And I will leave that link in the description for you guys. Today, we will be recapping everything that happened in this past week, including the World Cup, and we will be talking about every single result, but don't worry, that won't take too long. Also talking about a crazy week in NBA trades, and a few other stuff that happened this past 4th of July weekend, what to watch, and we'll also be giving you maybe a few thoughts to leave you for this next week. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. I know I've been talking a lot about it, but I'm going to mention it again. You know what's been happening this past week? It is, in fact, the World Cup. And this time we've reached the knockout stages in terms of the round of 32 and the round of 16. And the quarterfinals are coming up, which we'll talk about later. But with that being said, that means every single game is important and has an effect on who will end up with the trophy. So that being the case, I will be taking you through every single World Cup result in case you missed it over this past week. Starting with June 29th, Monday. That was probably the most legendary World Cup day in quite a bit. And not just because the World Cup happens every 4 years. To start the day, Brazil played Japan, and after going down early with a goal from Japan to give them the lead 1-0, Brazil came back and scored 2 goals, one of them by Martinelli in stoppage time to give them the lead 2-1. You may think that was enough excitement for one day, but then Paraguay beat Germany in one of the biggest upsets of this tournament, 4-3 in penalties, after the score out in regulation and extra time was 1-1. So Germany, the former World Cup champs, are now out. And for the nightcap, it did not disappoint. One of the games I highlighted, Morocco versus Netherlands, also went into penalties after a late Morocco goal forced extra time. Morocco ended up winning 3-2 in penalties in a case where nobody seemed to remember how to shoot. Moving on to Tuesday, the early game, Norway faced Ivory Coast, and I thought that would be a pretty good game, and it turned out to be one. Norway scored the first goal when Ivory Coast soon responded near the end of the game, but then Norway scored at the end to give them a 2-1 win. In the first real blowout of the knockout stages, France beat Sweden 3-0 in a very expected game, and Mexico beat Ecuador, who probably wasn't even supposed to be there after they had to beat Germany themselves in a thriller. So, Mexico, France, and Norway advanced on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the USA beat Bosnia despite a Balogun yellow card. He also scored one goal before he was red card. He also scored one goal before he was sent off. And actually, side note about that, Balogun, who has been, in my opinion, the best player for the U.S. this World Cup, despite getting a red card that probably shouldn't have been a red card, the U.S. kind of appealed, even though they weren't supposed to, and FIFA took away his red card. So he'll be available for Belgium in the upcoming game. Belgium beat Senegal 3-2, and that was a really fun game because Senegal was an African nation, and usually you don't expect them to do too well, though I do really like Senegal, and like I said in earlier episodes, I like their speed. They took a 2-0 lead, and it felt like they knew what they were doing, they knew how to close it out. Well, in the 86th minute, Lukaku scored, and then in the 89th, Belgium scored again to give them 2-2, sent it into extra time, and then at the end of the game, with quite literally like 1 minute left, Senegal fouled Belgium, and Belgium scored a penalty to force no penalties and give them the lead, and the win 3-2. England also beat Congo 2-1 in a game where Congo actually had the lead for the majority of the match, but England and Harry Kane took it away near the end. On Thursday, Switzerland beat Algeria in the very late game 2-0, and Portugal beat Croatia 2-1 in another thriller. That was a very good game because Ronaldo scored his first knockout goal, and then Croatia, tried to fight back continuously because the score was 2-1 after a Ramos goal. and their goal ended up being offside because it grazed one of their players' hair. Also, Spain beat Austria that Thursday 3-0. On Friday, Egypt beat New Zealand in a thriller 4-2 on penalties after another 1-1 after regulation. What was interesting about that game was Australia took out their goalkeeper and put in Matt Beach. And that did not seem to pay off because he was not warmed up at all for the Egypt penalties. Colombia beat Ghana 1-0, and unfortunately, though Cape Verde put a valiant fight, and my hot take did not come true, Argentina beat Cape Verde 3-2 in extra time. However, Cape Verde put up a fight. However, an own goal off the hand, and since it was off their own player of Cape Verde, gave Argentina the lead. And since it was off their own player's hand, it would not count as a handball or a foul because it ended up going to the goal and was a better result for Argentina. And Vozinha put up a legendary performance, may I say, against the GOAT himself. And on Saturday, with the round of 32 being over, the round of 16 could begin. France beat Paraguay in a chippy game 1-0 off of an Mbappe penalty kick, and that game was very, very physical. Morocco beat Canada 3-0, all with a flurry of second half goals. And on Sunday, Norway beat Brazil 2-1. Neymar scored his last ever World Cup, and I'm assuming Brazil goal. However, a Holland brace was too much because Neymar scored after they were already down 2-0. It was too little, too late. And finally, to wrap up the week of the World Cup, England beat Mexico in another amazing game. They won 3-2. They took a lead 2-0 after Bellingham scored twice in 2 minutes. And then a goal to end the half for Mexico brought it 2-1. Then England got a penalty. Harry Kane knocked it through to make it 3-1. Then they got a red card, so they were playing with 10 men. And despite England playing with 10 men, Mexico was only able to get a penalty themselves, but nothing else to make their loss a score of 3-2. Moving on to the NBA, and the World Cup has been taking much of the attention, but this was a very crazy week in the NBA, may I say. If you thought last week was insane, wait till you see all the trades that happened this week. To begin the week, Ja Morant, the former Grizzlies player, got traded to the Trail Blazers in exchange for Jerami Grant and Chris Murray. Ja Morant is one of the best athletes in the NBA. We'll see if he can try and raise himself as one of the best players. And then also Kawhi Leonard, I don't want to say returns home, but returns to his home-ish where he won an NBA championship to the Toronto Raptors. The Clippers sent Leonard to Toronto in exchange for Ingram, Grady Dick, 2 unprotected first-round picks, 31 and 33, the years 31 and 33, a first-round pick swap in 2027, and 2 second-round picks in 2030 and 2033. This is kind of similar to what the Raptors did when they traded for Kawhi Leonard originally, and we'll see if this pays off for them. And the King is no longer in LA. He informed the Lakers he is leaving them, and he is open to any team. With the Lakers, he obviously became an NBA champion, brought his number of rings to 4, and broke the all-time scoring record. Had a few solid seasons, but fell off in the last few. I don't want to say fell off because he was a star player, but not to LeBron quality, may I say. And it finally happened. No, not Giannis, that happened last week, but Jaylen Brown is going to the 76ers. The 76ers sent Paul George 2 first-round picks in 2028, 2031, 2 second-round picks in 2028 and 2030, and the Boston obviously gave up Jaylen Brown. This creates a kind of terrifying court, though it may be an injury-ridden one, for the 76ers, as they have Joel Embiid, Jaylen Brown, Tyrese Maxey, and VJ Edgecombe. That was all the major trades that happened in the NBA this week. Now, moving on to the MLB, the All-Star squads were released. That was probably the biggest news to come out of the Professional Baseball League. The AL is headlined, obviously, by Aaron Judge and Dylan Cease, while the NL is headlined by, I would like to say, one of the faces of the MLB, Shohei Ohtani and Jacob Mizorowski. Some of the snubs include Wilson Contreras from the Red Sox and Jason Robleski from the Dodgers. They probably could have made the squad, but I wouldn't say there were as many egregious snubs as you could say there have been in past years. In the NHL, Alex Ovechkin, the all-time goals leader in the NHL, is re-signing for a one-year deal with the Capitals. His current goal total across his career is 929, which is the most of all time. He's actually 71 goals away from $1 grand, which is possible but not probable, especially considering his age and where the Capitals were last year. And now, in other sports, Joey Chestnut won the annual Coney Island hot dog contest. Once again, he ate 66 hot dogs, which is 15 more than the next guy, Bertoletti. That's his 18th mustard belt, which is 3 times as much as second place with 6 mustard belts, Kobayashi. In the Formula One world, Hamilton got back on the podium, though he did already win a race earlier this year, and this was his home race in the British Grand Prix. His previous Silverstone, which is the name of the track at the British Grand Prix, his podium record was 12 races in a row before last year, where he did not finish in the podium, and Nico Hülkenberg finished in his place, and Hamilton ended up finishing 4th, but he got back on the podium here, and his next streak probably won't be as long, but he is probably hoping to have another streak. Charles Leclerc ended up winning the race, and that's his first win since 2024 in the U.S., which was a good day for Ferrari. And they almost had a 1-2 if George Russell did not end up overtaking Hamilton under the safety car, which ended the race. And in women's Wimbledon, Serena lost in 3 sets in her return to singles Grand Slam tennis, and she did not end up playing doubles with her sister because of a knee injury. So, that was a lot. But that's all you need to know about what happened in this past week of sports. So, what should you watch in this upcoming week of sports? Well, of course, I'm going to say the World Cup. And I'm going to give you every single game once again, but I will highlight the games that I think you should especially watch, which includes this first one on the list. On Monday, Portugal plays Spain, 3 p.m. Eastern on Fox. It seems like this will be Ronaldo's last World Cup, but maybe even his last game with Portugal. We'll see if Lamine Yamal and crew can pull it out and advance. Also on Monday, USA plays Belgium at 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Like I said, there's some controversy with the Balogun red card and it being lifted. The Belgian Federation is very upset about it, but I think the U.S. will actually pull this one through. I'm believing in them for the first time this World Cup. Hopefully they do not let me down. On Tuesday, Egypt plays Argentina at 12 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Argentina should win, but they've shown weakness, and maybe that Egypt offense can pick apart the Argentinian defense. On Tuesday, Colombia plays Switzerland at 4 p.m. Eastern on Fox, and we have a break on Wednesday, because on Thursday, in what is probably the game of this round of 16, France plays Morocco. Oh, sorry, not round of 16. In the quarterfinals, because Colombia and Switzerland end the round of 16, France plays Morocco in a rematch of last year's semifinals. Morocco is a tough team, and France showed weakness against Paraguay. They were the dominant team, and Paraguay was just defending for the whole game. But it seems like this strategy, especially with an offense like Morocco, is to be physical against France. And then, now we have the unknowns. On Friday, the winner of Portugal, Spain, and U.S.-Belgium plays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Fox for the quarterfinals. And on Saturday, Norway plays England. That one's guaranteed at 5 p.m. Eastern on Fox. I'm going to take England in a close one. It will be interesting to see how Haaland interacts with many of his English teammates at Manchester City. On Saturday, the winner of Argentina and Egypt plays the winner of Switzerland and Colombia. Probably the most underwhelming matchup that could happen in the quarterfinals, though an Argentinian-Colombian matchup would be very entertaining, as it is a rematch of the Copa America final. And that is all we know for the quarterfinals. But moving on to tennis, for men's Wimbledon, the semifinals are on Friday, and the final is on Sunday. The time is still to be determined, but turn that on ESPN if you want to see some good tennis on a grass court. And in the MLB, a good divisional series leading up to the All-Star break would be the Diamondbacks-Dodgers, if you can find a way to turn that on. That is a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday series. So that is what you need to watch in this upcoming week of sports. Now, moving on to the last and final segment, I want to leave you guys with a little question, something to think about before I see you next week. And that is, we talk about the GOAT conversation in any sport, it feels like almost every day. It could be in basketball where it's like LeBron versus Jordan, and some people don't even have LeBron in the GOAT conversation, and some people don't even have Jordan, though I disagree with both people who have those opinions. Also, it could be in a sport like soccer. It feels like Messi is the GOAT, but under Messi, who is it? A lot of people say Ronaldo, but what about Pele? And a lot of people say, what about Pele's timeline, which we'll get into? Or even in a sport about baseball. And that's really hard to do because in baseball, the offense and defense are so separated, it's almost hard to get someone, especially on the pitching side, who is really good at both. But that's why unicorns like Shohei Ohtani are so valuable. So my question is, how do you compare people? Because it feels like almost a consensus, especially in American sports, is by championships. But if it was by championships, why isn't Bill Russell considered the greatest basketball player of all time? And so and the main question I'm thinking that I want to leave you guys with is, what is the cutoff? When do you stop comparing? Because the reason people say Bill Russell is not the GOAT is because of his competition. Otherwise, 11 NBA championships is 11 NBA championships, especially in 13 years. That means 2 years he didn't win a championship. That's the stuff of GOATs, right? Well, no, because, yes, it's the stuff of GOATs, but it's not considered in the conversation because he played against people who often had other jobs. Compared to today's NBA, where obviously, if you are playing professional basketball, that is all you do. And in soccer, Pelé won 3 World Cups, and he is considered in the GOAT conversation. However, he didn't necessarily have the same club accolades, which isn't necessarily his fault because in that timeline, it was hard for players in South America to go to the best place in Europe, even a guy of Pelé's caliber. And Pelé retired in 1977, meaning it was a different era. If Pelé had the same skill relative to his class in today's era, he probably would be the GOAT, because 3 World Cups, like I said, with championships, is 3 World Cups, and that's the most all-time for any player. And combined with the club accolades, which he had club accolades in his club career in South America, and that would be enough, I think, to secure him in the GOAT conversation in this era. I still believe that Messi is the GOAT, and I still believe that Bill Russell is not. And in stuff like baseball, Babe Ruth was considered the greatest player in his generation, but if you put Babe Ruth in this generation of baseball players, he just simply wouldn't be as good at all. That's not even a question. Slower pitches, they didn't even wear helmets when they bat. That's how slow it could be without being concerned about safety, or they just didn't have the same research then. But that's not the point. It was just a different type of baseball, and he wouldn't be able to survive where these guys throw over 100 nowadays. And so I'm wondering, what is the cutoff? Because you don't want to take away, for example, Babe Ruth from baseball. You don't want to say, well, he played in a terrible era, let's just forget about him and move on, because we don't do that. But what is the cutoff when you debate the GOAT conversation? Is it for basketball in 1969 when Russell retired? But then that feels very exclusive to Russell, because guys like Kareem are still not necessarily maybe in the number 1 spot, but in the top 5 for sure, right? And they played after Russell, Kareem did, but it was still earlier in the century. Earlier in the decades. Or in soccer, is it in 1977 when Pelé retired? Or maybe later when South American players had more chances for European club opportunities? I don't want to say that I have the answer, because I don't. I got to think it's somewhere in the 1900s, especially the late 1900s, but it just varies from sport to sport. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts? You guys can let me know in the comments or whatever. I do know that sounds cheesy, but I honestly wonder. I wonder what the consensus is, because this is something that I think you need to consider when you talk about conversations for the number 1 spot, but even below, because we all love to rank our top 10s. So yeah, what is the cutoff for decades? You tell me the sport, you tell me the year, and let's see your opinions. But other than that, thank you for listening to another episode of All in a Day of Sports. Once again, we are now on Instagram and all the other platforms I mentioned earlier. Those links will be in the description. I don't have anything else for you. Just remember to follow wherever you are listening, and I will see you next week. And in case you wanted it, here is some bonus content and a sneak peek of one small sample of my reactions to the penalty shootouts in the World Cup.
Yes! 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 Come on! Yes! Yes! Whoa! Come on!
Thank you.